State Management Office, Dr. Abraham, the distinguished honorees in the Hall of Fame, Dr. Anyanwu, once upon a time, a most distinguished colleague at the University of Nigeria, and so you are all welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really a great pleasure for me to be here. I feel highly honored, and I must thank and congratulate Maureen and the management of the Realnews. That's really the real news, and I want to wish you well. You've done exceedingly very well professionally in your career. Now you are running your own. And I think now that you've started the Realnews, this is the third year, I can only say that the sky will be the beginning. That's our prayer and wish, and we'll all continue to support you to get even beyond the sky. Keep up the good job. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as she said, personally, I confirmed to give this lecture in May. My thinking was that between then and now, the government would have put in place, there would have been an agenda, the economy should have been somewhere heading, and therefore we would have had something substantive to review. That was my expectation. Well, the cabinet has just been sworn in, and so the government is probably, the cabinet is probably still cooking the agenda. And therefore, when I thought about that, I said, no, I'm not going to come setting that. I would rather comment on that because you don't preempt them. Let them tell us where they want to go, then we can say whether this can go or not go. But then I couldn't wriggle out again, and here we are. But what we do here today, second caveat, is that we also agreed that I was going to speak extempore because of my schedule. I could just have a few points and speak to them. But just a few days ago, 2-3 days ago, even in between my flights, I must tell you, up until this morning I was still writing. I then decided, no, I better put the things down. So when we finish, I'm probably sure, Maureen, she hasn't seen that, but I just printed it out. They just printed it out for me at the reception. I haven't even read that, but you can upload it with all the errors and caveats there, whatever. If you find it too daddy, so be it. But I have it written up, so what I'm going to say here will be a summary of what you find there, because I set out to really write it out as clearly as I can in terms of my views, so you can have it in writing. I don't want people interpreting what I have said or what I have not said. Having said that, let me say that the lecture is also auspicious now that we have a new government. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to be a little bit preemptive and also provocative of some sort. You know, being an independent fellow now, I don't belong to PDP, I don't belong to APC. So I can have the liberty, it's just to say it the way I say it. And at least from the balcony. For those of us who oppose, and let me state upfront, that I supported President Buhari over Jonathan for the presidential election. I did so for 3 reasons. The first was that I was convinced that the previous economic team was bankrupting the economy and they had no clue how to fix it. I was convinced, and I said so in my article in January. Second, I looked around, I was convinced President Buhari happened, to the best of my knowledge, to be the very first person in our democracy who seriously desired the job, worked on it for over 12 years. And I reasoned that this person who desired the job, we must give somebody who actually has the ambition to lead us. There must be a few points he wants to prove. And I was prepared to bet on a person who wanted the job, purposefully, than somebody who was reluctantly, going there. And the third was that I reasoned that if President Buhari got there as a president, and the APC as a new political party, they will be very hungry to deliver. At least it will be in their own enlightened self-interest to deliver on the economy in order to retain power, rather than the PDP that had grown to now take power for granted. For me, for those three reasons, I supported Buhari to win over Jonathan. I thought that they were going to deliver, and I'm still fairly confident that they will deliver, although I had said in my article in January that I didn't believe that any of the two parties would deliver on the manifesto that they were brandishing to us. Those things were for the electioneering thing, because I didn't see that the numbers were adding up. And let me put one or two caveats as well. The first is to make a point that there is now a new cabinet, and I strongly support the new cabinet in place. I think Buhari has selected eminently qualified Nigerians. See, the issue about wealth and so on is like beauty, it's in the eye of the beholder. And more importantly, the fact that he has selected believers, people of the APC family, those who believe in the vision and mission of the political party. And so, to that extent, you have more or less like a compact team believing in the same direction. And therefore, there shall be no excuses. The second caveat I put is that I read in the media that the Vice President said he is responsible for the economy. For me, okay, I think we must congratulate Buhari if he has delegated this to the Vice President. I said so in my article in January, that my understanding is that the intention of our Constitution is that the Vice President shall be the coordinating minister on the economy. He is the chairman of the National Economic Council. By law, the chairman of major federal government agencies on the economy, including National Planning Commission, Debt Management Office, and so on and so forth, National Council on Privatization. It's a peculiar institutional design in our own case, even though I have some views as to how we can change the Constitution so that the Vice President is not an automatic successor in the case of any accident. So the Vice President can focus, on the technical job of running the economy. So once the President selects his Vice President, we should have a sense as to where the economy should be going. I think Buhari has said he wants to focus on rebuilding institutions, and therefore getting these institutions to work, I think, is the starting point. We've never allowed them to work the way as designed. We had sometimes replaced these institutions of government with a nebulous construct called the economic team. I have some thoughts as to how they could strengthen the existing institutions and even probably add new ones to create what I call the war room on the economy going forward. In this piece, I basically have three key sections of this paper. And let me, for the first time, draw Maureen's attention to the fact that I have taken liberty to slightly modify the title. The title is, Can a New Buharinomics Save Nigeria? Give you the context of this choice. Potentials. Today we are the largest economy in Africa. Some projections put us in terms of population to be about the third largest country in the world by the end of this century. Economies in the world. These are potentials. It could also still unravel. You go in and cascade down to today. How And the principal point I want to make here today is that this government, newly constituted, has barely 3 annual budgets and less than 7,000 hours if they work 8 hours a day to deliver the change that we can see. There isn't much time. But to go from here to there, I can see a tension that is growing. Tension between the old and the new. Tension between the past and the future. I see a tension between what I say as the old Buharinomics and what ought to be the new Buharinomics for the next Nigeria. 2015 is the first year in the second 100 years of our existence as a country. 2014 ended the first 100 years. This is the first year. We also elected a new president this year. So far, it will be my thesis in this paper, that so far, this economy, as of today, is underperforming relative to its potentials for the last few months, for a combination of reasons. And I want to say, there is already what I call at least a 4% growth shortfall relative to trend. And that is because of some acts of omission or commission, because of this tension that I see between the past and the challenge of a progressive march to the future. And I will outline what I say as this old path that must give way if we are going to realize the potentials of this country. And therefore, I will, in the the third part of it, outline some of the elements, some of building blocks that I say must underpin this new Buharinomics. And then we'll ask the question whether this can save Nigeria. To put a context to this, let me ask the question, what is APC trying to change? And I want to frame the discourse almost in a sense. The good news now is that we're in a democracy. And luckily also, Nigeria has evolved almost to a de facto status of a two-party state. So, whether it's in the Americas, you say the Republicans and the Democrats, whether it's in the UK, you find the Conservatives and the Labour Party dominant, and so on and so forth. So we can see the party on the blue, on the red side, on the opposite side, and so on and so forth. We can begin over time to ask, who is better on the economy? If you want to change a thing, the starting point is, what is the baseline that you are meeting? Where are you starting off? So you can compare deviations over time, or the change. How do we measure the change and know if it has occurred, or if it is occurring? And I look at the trend so far, therefore I frame it in the following, as I said, I frame it in what I call the PDP's legacy and the APC's challenge. The fundamental challenge of the APC, I will argue here, argue in this paper, is that APC is taking off, is starting from a much stronger base than PDP did in 16 years, when it started off 16 years ago. And it has a fundamental challenge now to make it better. We must put it in terms of there versus this one versus the other, and challenge the APC to show us the figures. For the sake of Nigeria, we must change the narrative. Enough of the book of lamentations. We must now move on to show us the figures. And I put in a point I make here is that if you can measure it, you cannot change it. We must strengthen the National Bureau of Statistics. I feel embarrassed when I hear public officials quoting estimates of World Bank and so on and so forth. And let me, as part of the context, Well, when I read what the public officials say about the country and the economy, the way I regard it is part of those usual, things new policy makers on the blocks do. First of all, you show that your predecessors did nothing. So you lay the background so that you can now claim that everything now happening is happening for the first time in our history. It's the usual thing you get policy makers. So whenever I hear kind of things, I take it that it belongs in that category. But we must now change that narrative. If it's become usual to attribute all the ills of this country, and there are many of them, to the PDP's 16 years of government, it is then equally fair to give them the credit, if anything positive.